There's always light and darkness, and there's always darkness and light. And I will be that light in the darkness of this film's reviews. I of course refer to the fact that Warcraft has been one of the most hated films of the summer. The critics have gone insane when it comes to how much they despise this movie. It's this year's Fantastic Four. I mean, yeah, I thought the critics wouldn't like it, but 22% on Rotten Tomatoes? That's lower than Waterboy and around the same level as Little Nicky when it comes to, bad movies. I'm like, geez, it's worse than those? And I was wondering, it seemed like for a while that nobody liked this movie, except maybe a couple of the fans of the video game. So what did I think of it? I actually kind of liked it. I know my credibility might be lost as a critic, but let me explain to you why I enjoyed this film. Let's start with the story. The story of the film revolves around two factions, the Alliance and the Horde. On the Horde, the homeland of the orcs has been dying, so a shaman named Gul'dan, played by Daniel Wu, opens up this portal to the human realm of Azeroth using a magic called Fel. Fel is basically this green magic that is fueled by the life force of others. Dark magic. And Gul'dan manages to send a number of orcs over to the human realm of Azeroth to take it over. In the Azeroth, we have the other faction known as the Alliance, where our main character is Lothar, played by Travis Fimmel from Vikings, who initially thinks he has to save Azeroth from these orcs, but then he finds out that the orcs might not be as evil as they initially seem, as there are good guys and bad guys on both sides. Especially one orc named Durotan, played by Toby Kebbell, and his wife Draka. So it's up to these two factions to work together to bring down the evil shaman Gul'dan before he uses his Fel magic to bring the rest of the orcs over to Azeroth to, basically take it over. The story, in my opinion, actually does work in this film's advantage. I know there's a huge amount of lore in the Warcraft universe that you've got to condense into a 2-hour movie, but for the most part, it does work. The story does have some good stakes, a lot of characters are pretty likable, and a lot of major characters even die throughout. I won't spoil anything, but the amount of main characters that bite the dust in the film is actually kind of staggering, especially for a video game adaptation. Though I must say that the characters are really more interesting when they're on the orc side rather than when they're on the human side. I mean, Travis Fimmel does a good job as Lothar, but he's sort of just a one-dimensional hero. Dominic Cooper as King Lane is just a one-dimensional king. Lady Taria is a one-dimensional queen, etc. Most of the main human characters are not very likable, and they're not very interesting. And Ben Foster as Medivh, the Guardian, I felt his acting was really lazy. In fact, he really doesn't seem to emote that much when he's acting, even when he tries to overact near the finale, and I won't spoil it for there. The orcs, on the other hand, are very interesting characters. Toby Kebbell especially does a great job as Durotan, and in many ways I found him to be more qualified in the role of protagonist. I mean, the opening of the film just shows him and his wife talking. It shows him and his pregnant wife Draka talking like, a typical married couple, and it's actually really touching, mainly because the visual effects for the orcs are just so good. Their faces, their bodies, the way they move around with the environment, it's some of the best visual effects I've seen when it's obvious, when it's still obvious CGI, but it feels really well done. Not only that, but most of the magical effects are pretty well done too. I mean, when it comes to both the Fel magic and the normal magic, it really does look just like the games, just, upgraded for a cinematic stage. Not to also mention, the action scenes are a lot of fun to watch. I know some critics have compared them to, low-rent versions of the Lord of the Rings battles, but I still think they're fun to watch. There's tons of things going on in the background, there's a huge amount of carnage and mayhem, and it really does feel like one of the battles from the World of Warcraft games, even though this games, even though this movie is based on the first game, not the MMO. Garona is actually surprisingly one of my favorite characters too, played by Paula Patton. She's a half-orc, half-human, and surprisingly, I find her acting to be very well done, and the way the film ends makes me think she might have a larger role if the film ever has a sequel. Yes, there's an obvious sequel bait ending, but considering that Warcraft is a series that has so much lore and so many expansions, I sort of expected a sequel bait ending to go along with it. I just hope it gets enough box office to get to that far. So, one thing that I also loved about the movie was Gul'dan, as I believe he's actually an amazing villain. He reminds me of Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat. He's so arrogant and so, pompous, but he's, at the same time, he's so powerful and so mighty that you can't help but like the guy, despite the fact that you also hate his guts for what he does in the movie. He's an entertaining villain, to be sure. Now, if all you're looking for is fan service, there's plenty here. There's dwarves, elves, blood elves, a ton of recognizable locations from the games. If you're a fan of Warcraft, you'll definitely love this film. And even non-fans like myself admired how close most of the characters and most of the environments looked to their video game counterparts. It's clear that director Duncan Jones really does love the series. So, if you're as long as you're not a stick in the mud and you're actually trying to enjoy the film, you'll definitely appreciate it, which I, unlike so many other critics, try to do, and I think I succeeded at that. So, I actually believe this film was great acting, a good story, impressive visual effects, and even though there are some problems, I believe the pacing was a bit off in certain scenes. I felt that some characters didn't get as much development as they deserved, and the human characters could have been more likable. But overall, it's a pretty good fantasy film. I think of it the same way that I think of the Hobbit movies. It's not the best they could have done with the source material, but it could have been a hell of a lot worse, especially considering it was a video game movie. So I gotta give them credit for at least trying. I give Warcraft a 6.5 out of 10. See you later.